My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Follow the Lead Podcast, a Christian Leaders Podcast powered by Greg Fay Insurance. If you haven't talked to my man Greg Fay, do so today. Go to gregfayinsurance.com. Today on the podcast, a cool conversation, pun intended, with Ricky Dickson. Ricky is the former CEO and president of the Bluebell Creameries. It's an ice cream shop, but don't get it twisted. This conversation is a lot more than ice cream. His latest book, One Scoop at a Time, is all about stories and lessons from his life as a CEO. Fascinating conversation with Ricky. I know you're going to absolutely love it. And if you do love it, do me a favor. Share this episode with a friend. Maybe somebody who you know would benefit from living not in fear, or somebody who needs to take that big step of faith. I love the stories he shares of faith and family to delivering ice cream to the president. This was a rich conversation, and I know you're going to enjoy it. So, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Ricky Dickson. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited today to have author, CEO, and speaker Ricky Dickson with us. Ricky, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
Absolutely, and thank you so much, son, for having me. I said us. My wife was just in here, so I'm still in the plural, but I'm flying solo. It is great to be here.
Well, I had to call your wife because I was running late for this interview, which I hate and am embarrassed by, but it was nice to chat with your wife on the phone. She seems like an incredible human, and I've heard you talk about her and how much she means to you, so it was good to put a voice with the name that I had kind of heard so much about.
Fantastic. I always introduce her as my better 2/3 and some days 3/4, depending upon the day. So, yeah, she's special, no question. I called her my agent when I was on the phone with you, but she's really my lovely assistant. I was corrected. So, anyway, it's great. She is great and really takes good care of her.
Well, we're going to get into your story a little bit because obviously that connection with your wife is a big part of it, and about your faith and your perseverance through all of that. But as we kind of step back and look at it from a macro perspective, you've been in the ice cream business for a long time, and you've also now written a book, and you're speaking all over the place. And so I'm curious, how would you define the calling that God has placed on your life?
Great question, especially using ice cream maybe as the conduit to get me where he would like for me to be. I think, fortunately, growing up in a Christian home and with a Christian environment, I was so stressed by my parents to learn how to have a relationship and to have a relationship, not just a religion. And so through that, I think that was really the concrete or foundation that kept my eyes open in my prayer life to say, God, what is it that you want me to do? Really, when I got to college and then was praying for that next door to open, being able to recognize that, and I kind of dive through that in the beginning of my book on what led me to Baylor University and then what led me from Baylor University to Bluebell Creamery. And just being open and available to be used in a way that may be more unique, because I tell people I didn't grow up one day I'm going to be working for an ice cream company. In fact, we didn't eat a lot of ice cream in our house, but we eat a lot of it now. So,
do you have a daily rhythm with ice cream? Is it like one bowl a day, one scoop a day? Do you have how's that work? How do you manage that?
Used to be one bowl a day. We had to get it back to one scoop a day. Yeah, thanks as I'm getting a little bit older and watching the sugar count a little bit more closely than I used to. So, but yes, on probably 6 out of 7 days, we have some ice cream of a flavor of whatever we have, and it just really complements the day.
You know, one of the things that I heard about your story is that you got connected to Bluebell through a paper at Baylor, and it's a paper that came up about 4 pages short of where it needed to be, if my research is correct. I would love for you to tell us a little bit of that story.
Yes, it was one of the, back when we had a typewriter to use in our computers, and you had to, type and use, the carbon paper behind it to make a separate copy. I'm really dating myself, but the paper was much a full grade for the semester of the consumer relations class and how the company relates to the consumer. And I went back to my apartment and called my dad and said, "I've got this project. I have nowhere to begin." And he said, "Well, this is weird." I said, "Not weird." He said, "It's ironic." I said, "Well, I'm sitting here reading about this little company in Brenham, Texas called Bluebell Ice Cream. And it's a great article. Let me start over." And so he read it to me. And I thought, well, who doesn't like ice? I mean, everybody loves it. So I thought, what a neat opportunity. And I called, and they said, "Come on down, and we'll help navigate this thing together." But when I got to the end, I was about 4 pages short. And I didn't have the time to run back to Brenham to get more material. But I remembered that the president and CEO at the time, his son, Paul Cruzzi, happened to be going to law school at Baylor. And so pulled out a phone book, looked his name up, called him, and said, "Man, I'm short. I need help on your family's company. Any way I can swing by and get some more information." And so Paul was gracious enough to invite me in, and then we spent some time together. And so he takes these as the claim for the grade at the end of the paper. But it all turned out great. But it was a great way to be introduced into the family in a unique way. And it was actually working side by side with Paul in his final days, and then being able to take over with Paul when he retired. What an honor. What an honor. So Cruzzi family is very special to you.
You know, it's always interesting to me when I see a leader step into a family-owned business that's not family, right? As that transition had to have been incredibly hard for you, and anybody who'll tell you who does succession planning and the kind of the coaching world that I hang out in will say that going into a family-owned business is really quite difficult to do. How did you know that the Lord was calling you to step into that when that boardroom unanimously voted to make you the next CEO?
Even though the Cruzies aren't actually the owners, they're a majority of, or were a major part of, more community owned back when we were a small little company. But the Cruzzi family for almost 100 years really have made us who we are. And so I will tell you that it was so surprising when they turned and said, "We're putting you into that position," that it had to be a God thing. It wasn't something that, I quote Bubba Watson when he won the Masters for the first time, and they said, "What's it feel like?" And he said, "I never got this far in my dreams." Well, when you work for a company that's run by the Cruzzi family for so long, don't spend a lot of time thinking, well, what would it be like to be in that position? And in the book, I really describe also there was a real turning point in my career that I either got in line with what God was doing with my life, or I was caught up in my own, I call it pride, what I was hoping and expecting things to be happening. And so when that happened, when they turned and said, "We were putting you there and we're going to vote," I knew in my heart that this was a God thing. This was something that he, over the course, and again, one scoop at a time, talked about how he prepared me for such a moment. And it also, the seriousness and the responsibility, he said, "Take it one day at a time." So look, I'm going to put you here, but listen and follow the direction I'm giving you. And so for the 7 years that I was there as CEO and president, that's how I approached it. This was our company. This was definitely not my company. And to jump in and to be able to keep us going, coming out of the situation we come out of in 2015, and getting not just back into the markets that we had to pull out of, but also get the product line that we once had, was some tough days. But tremendous team, tremendous people to work with. And God was there guiding every step of the way, every step of the way. If I could quite that one more time.
2015 was such a big turning point for you guys, but I think a lot of our listeners may not know exactly what was going on. Can you kind of give us the overview of what took place?
We woke up in the middle of February finding out that we had Listeria monocytogenes in some of our grocery snack items. And really what led was finding those items containing it, but also having it not in just one plant, but two plants. It was a shock. It definitely, it was devastating to us to our needs, and also was a real checkpoint to look. Let's take this to a new level. And so we brought in microbiologists. We brought in different teams from different perspectives, and really redid the way we operate without changing the culture, without changing the products, but yet adapting to the things that we need to do to move forward. And so from taking out the floor and replacing it, the walls, the ceiling, all the equipment had to be looked at. It was all about how can we make the environment in a way that can be clean and give us assurance that the product is safe to eat. It's ice-free. It should be a safe product to eat. You shouldn't have to be worried about it. And so it's all the way from an incredibly robust environmental program to actually testing every single product that is made to this day. We test throughout the day everything that's made, and we don't send that product out until we get those tests back. It's just that we've done everything that we can. But we shut down from April 21st of 2015 to Labor Day. All operations pulled about 8 million gallons worth of product out of the country. And really just hit a reset button. But again, I say, keeping that culture, keeping the flavor, and what I like to say is creating memories in every carton. We didn't want to jeopardize that, but we did want to make sure that we were doing everything we could to make it as safe as possible.
One of the things that's interesting is that if my research is correct, you were the VP of sales and marketing at that point in time when the plant gets shut down and everything goes crazy. What did you learn about communicating with consumers as a leader? Because you're really out there taking all the hits, I could imagine, right? And it's hard to put myself in your shoes, but when you think about the voice of a Christian in a moment like this, and not just big business, but also being transparent and honest and authentic, but without, inciting more panic. Talk to me about the communication from the customers and to the people who were following you.
Oh, great question. And for us, it was the first time in the history of the company that we've ever had a layoff. We had never had to recall any product. So it was uncharted territory coming out of the block. And then we were learning as we were getting information. So I think you said it perfectly. Is how do you communicate that without creating false information, false sense of security? What is exactly going on into the level? And things were happening very, very rapidly. So looking back and the steps that we took and continue to take, I think that we were doing what we felt like we should be doing responsibility-wise. We were getting the product pulled back in, but we were communicating what we could at the time the best we could. And but yet I think we learned tremendous. I hate to say by April, we got it down pretty doggone good. And so that's a book for another day and from another author. But I will tell you that just playing hard and asking for guidance. How do you communicate? How do you navigate in all aspects? Not just for the consumer, but also with the employees, with your community, and it affected so many lives. And so tough period of time, no question.
One of the things that I appreciate about your story is that walking by faith seems to be a big part of it. From the numerous amount of moves that you had to make in order to stay with the company, to kind of the really hard story about your first marriage and what that meant to you from a faith perspective. When you think about what it means to lean on Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 and walk by faith, on a daily basis as a Christian leader, what comes to your mind today?
Yes, I would say, I related a lot in my talks and in the book with Mark chapter 4, when the disciples get on the boat and go out with Jesus. He goes up to the front of the boat and goes to sleep, and then the storms come. And I have found that story fascinating on a lot of fronts. Number one is they're with the King, they're with the Messiah. And yet I don't really know if they really truly grasp that. Storms come, and they're taking on water, and yet Jesus sleeps. I mean, he doesn't wake up; they have to wake him up, and yet he controls everything around us. And so the fact that he's able to sleep, I think that's where I found peace. And so as I go into storms, even today, I go right back to that. There's also the story when they go back out in a couple of chapters later where, Jesus is walking on the water. And they've already seen it once, but now Peter's saying, if that's all you ask me to come out, and he says, come. And he steps out in faith. And I love those two as a reminder that storms are going to be in our lives. We're going to have storms if we live long enough at some point in our lives. And so how do we have, or what's the way that we can get to a point where we can find peace in the middle of the storm? Not necessarily at the end of the storm. How do you get to a place in Philippians 4, 6, and 7 that you pray and then you get this peace that passes all understanding? And that's what I was so desperately looking for. Is how can I wake up with the confidence that Christ, you're right there? To the point where you're so peaceful, you're sleeping, and I'm asking you, Jesus, hey, we got a problem here. And yet that's where I go. I literally, mentally place myself at his feet, praying that Jesus, you've got this. And I know once I let go, then the peace starts to come. I like to call it my second wind. I used to run track in college and high school. I was a miler. And a lot of times when I'd be out just on these long day runs, I would get to the point I would just can't quit. I'm tired. And yet I'm way out. There's no way to just quit. And yet I would keep running, and all of a sudden I would get this overwhelming surge of energy. It was almost as if I hadn't even been running. And they call that the second wind. Well, with Jesus, when we finally let go, you get that second wind. You get that peace that passes all understanding. And when you get there, it's hard to explain, but it's just an incredible peace. So I'm giving you a long answer to a great question, but I find that those little anchors that I go to in Scripture, and then just the stories that I read, I look for the second wind and knowing that it's coming, and I get strength from that.
I love listening to guys who are rooted in Scripture like you are, and who are also leading at a high capacity. And I think that there's a lot of listeners who are leading and want to continue leading at a high capacity, but in order to do so, they have to be rooted in their disciplines. One of the things we say around here a lot is that if you're not dedicated to your disciplines, you'll be destroyed by your distractions. And so I would love to hear about some of your daily disciplines that maybe we can steal from and learn from. Glean is the biblical word, glean, so that we can stay on course at a high productive rate.
Well, I think, again, it's a great question, and I love that comparison. I believe and you see it, hopefully, when I look back at my life, hopefully in the book, it's to be ready. And if you're ready, then you can be used. And so to be ready, you have to be disciplined. And so I look at it from a spiritual standpoint, physical standpoint, emotional standpoint. And so my journeys have developed a lot of those disciplines. You referred to the first marriage and what I went through. There was many mornings I was waking up repeatedly around 4:15, 4:30 in the morning. And it sounds crazy, but I took that as almost as if God was saying, Ricky, I want to talk to you. That's how I approached it. And when the creator of this universe says, I want to talk, you better get up and listen. And so I really use that as an anchor. And I will say, it's 75 to 80% of my mornings up until I just retired. So I've kind of moved the clock a little. But, 4:15 to 4:30 because it became my natural, normal time to get up, and it was to spend quality time, either in scripture or just reflecting. In the more recent days, I started exercising. I alluded to my sugar earlier, and so I thought, all those things about eating right and exercise. I thought, well, I better start doing both of those if I want to continue. And but what I love is being able to get out and walk. And we had a park nearby. And really consciously not talk, but just listen. I just want to hear whatever you have to say to me today, God, and just open it up to just listen. And whatever the thoughts were coming in, and so it may have been struggles of the day, it may have been somebody I promised I'd pray for, it may be just some of the greatness of God and the beauty around, of the world that we're in, no matter, whatever situation we find ourselves and stuff. It starts for me with a good start of the day, because if you start strong, you start planning because the distractions are going to come. You get back, you shower, you go to work, and the world starts screaming at you. And if you're not, if you're not prepared for that, you can get distracted very, very fast. And I find also that it also can affect you emotionally versus rationally. And when you're running a company, there's nothing worse than to try making decisions from emotions versus from a rational standpoint. So if you can go and saying, look, God, you have this, you speak to me, you see today in a way that will glorify you. It's for your glory, not for mine. And let's go after it. It gives you that kind of framework. Now, for every day, is every day that way? I won't lie, there are days that the world can get you pretty fast. But you know where to run back to. And so for me, those are some of my disciplines. On days that I really don't have anything specific, I go to the little Holy Bible app on my phone, and I got the little highlight section of scriptures that I've highlighted. And I just can read of the scriptures that have spoke to me at some point in time in my life, and just kind of a little refresher. And again, those little anchors for me help keep me grounded instead of caught up.
That's beautiful.
I rambled there. I hope.
No, it's good. Listen, we're here for this. Is the whole purpose of podcasting. It's to get to the long form answer because, truthfully, that's where the gems are. It's in the kind of the nuances of the answer. I think that a lot of us can appreciate the approach, and I think it's so critical. And speaking of critical, one of the chapters of the book that really made me think was hurricane seasons. And in that particular chapter, you kind of lay out the fragility of the product that you were shipping to millions of people, right? And I had never really thought of ice cream can melt and you could lose everything, right? So talk to me about what it means to steward something fragile like ice cream.
This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV. It's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
Well, it's one of the things I feel like our company has kept true to our culture, and that is we're a direct store delivery company. And so what that means is from the time the ice cream hits the carton, it goes through the freezing process. It then goes out on a transport that we operate to a branch or distribution center that we operate. They then place it on route trucks, and then those route trucks are then sent out to the supermarkets where we actually place the product on the shelves itself. Ice cream is really delicate. You want to keep it around minus 18, minus 20 degrees. It starts melting, even as minus 5 or even 0. If you want to scoop it easy, the freezer at 0, but what's happening is the product is actually going through a tank. And so it is going through a melting or a changing process to where the warmer temperature is I don't want to get too specific of ice cream, but you incorporate air into the mix. And so when you melt it, the water in the mix also hitting the air will form the ice crystals that you see in your freezer over a period of time if it's not kept properly. So being probably the most fragile possibly in the grocery store. There's very few other items that need to be kept at that degree of temperature. We take it extremely serious, especially for the fact that ice cream is all we do. We don't have any other product line in the store that we can kind of fall back to. It's ice cream and ice cream related take home and frozen snacks. And so, hurricane season, when they start popping up, and as we are approaching now June of every year, we have a pretty robust and pretty detailed standard operating procedure on how we go about not just protecting the products, but also protecting the employees and getting them to safety in plenty of time. And knowing that if a hurricane hits, the power will go out, and there'll be 24, 48, 72 hours where we won't have any power at any time. But then we're positioned to get back in with our own generators and get the product brought back up. But that story in the book really does walk through a safe journey that was good news, bad news, good news, bad news. Just kind of every time you picked up the phone, it was changing. But this was a great example of just staying faithful and playing that you navigate through it.
Hey guys, just pausing this conversation with Ricky to remind you to check out our sponsors. Trent Barga over at the Barga team does an incredible job of helping you find your next home. Whether that's a rental home, an investment home, or a vacation home, Trent wants to help you get into your next. Go to thebargateam.com, check him out, tell him Tony sent you. I'm sure you'll get the absolute best customer service in the world. There's no better time than now to act. Speaking of homes, you've heard me talk about 5-Star Home Services, absolutely one of my favorite companies with their profit on purpose mentality. 5-Star Home Services wants to pour into the local community and help make your home a forever home, a place that will keep you warm and keep the water running. So if you've got HVAC or plumbing needs, now is the time. So thankful for 5-Star Home Services and the work that they do. For more information on them, go to my5starhomeservices.com. Now, let's finish up this conversation with Ricky.
One of the things I appreciate about it is that I think it's so important for leaders to have a plan when things go wrong, and also at the same time trust in the Lord that he can make a lot of things right. And so, like, I know that there's one example where a tree falls in between two of your trucks. Doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, it's that's kind of like, well, we have a plan for if it hits the truck, but we also have a plan, but we have a prayer that it never will, right? Like, it's just.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And, and what I wanted in the book, too, to say that, it doesn't always work that way. So in the times that, you have a loved one that passes away due to an illness or you have something that just is tragedy, is I don't have an answer for that, but what I do have an answer is I have a God that loves me enough to know that he is in control and that he will navigate and guide you through whatever that situation might be. We also can move mountains with our faith. And so I think that you never stop giving up praying hard, because that's so deep of what he wants is that relationship. And there's plenty of scriptures, and I won't go into that God actually changed his mind. And there's from good things happening to not so good things happening, where he gave us what we prayed for. And so I really, I think those hard words, thy will be done, have to pretty much go with that request, because he really truly knows what's best. And there'll be a lot of questions in heaven on things that we don't understand here. But I also know that, again, there's a God that loves us more than we can comprehend. And it's for his glory in some form or fashion, and to be it, that's where I stand.
Amen. The story is, the book is also really well written in the sense of, like, there's a ton of stories that are just worth exploring. One of the ones that I definitely wanted to bring up today was you and Anita bringing ice cream to the former president of the United States, the Bushes in Georgia, or not Georgia, in Maine. Right. And so it's super funny because I was in the Army for reserves for a number of years. And when I deployed, they always stop in Bangor, Maine, because they already have quite a bit of security in that airport because of the Bush's estate around there. Can you kind of tell us a little about that story?
Sure. It's one of the really fun stories, and I really have to credit my wife on this one as well. We had a big, huge planned 100th anniversary in 2007 as a company. We'd been in business, started in 1907 as a butter company, started making ice cream in 1911, but we got away from butter and strictly ice cream in 1958. So you fast forward into the 90s and going into 2000, and there was a relationship built between George Bush, number 41, and also the Cruzies, Ed and Howard Cruzie, the two gentlemen that ran the company for so long. And we had invited him to come to our big, we had 1,000 people come to Brenham, Texas to celebrate our, what we call our 100th anniversary. And President Bush was unable to make it, but he sent a video. And so it was just a wonderful, heartfelt video, but kind of sidebarring, part of my responsibility was putting this big event together. And it took a lot of time, and so I promised my wife that when this is over, we'll go somewhere just to get away, that we can have some good quality time. And she said, well, why don't we go to Maine? Probably the furthest place you can go from Brenham, Texas. And so we planned our trip out, and then about 3 weeks prior to, she called me. I'm at work, and she said, why don't you call the president? See if maybe we can bring him some ice cream. And I said, yeah, okay, good. And then I thought, well, he does get Bluebell still periodically. And so I got the number and made the phone call, and a couple of days later, I got a call from Secret Service that he'd love to go to come down. And so we changed our trip around. We shipped 2 coolers of ice cream. We went a day early just to make sure that we knew that the ice cream was there. And we sent it to 2 different locations. So that way, if one didn't make it, you'd have it at the second. You can't show up at the President of the United States' house without ice cream, right? And so the ice cream made it, and I never forget, we got there, I'm telling the chapter, which is great, but we got there so early that we were kind of just forced to let's just wait outside. Well, there's Walker's Point, where compound is. You can sit on one side of the cove and look across to see the house. And there are cars that parked. And so people were sitting out on the hoods of their cars with binoculars looking across the cove to see if maybe catch people and see further. So we pulled in and we got out and visited for a while and thought, well, this is fun, but it's time to see. Let's see if we can get in. Well, we already knew that we were saying it somewhat out loud. And so we drive around and we go through the security. But I never will forget, we're in the car, and the gentleman at the gate, he calls the president. He says, Mr. President, your ice cream is here. So, if that's the calling card, that's another praise the Lord. So we had a great time. We visited with him. We ended up going up to the main house and visited with Barbara, the first lady, and had some great memories there. And then ended up back at where he was, the little office area that he had. And just had a great time. My favorite line from the whole thing is we're getting ready to leave, and we're right out where you normally find their pictures are being taken with the dignitaries that come through. And he kind of points out in the ocean. He said, "You see that boat out there?" I said, that's my boat. But I got it up to 70 miles an hour. And I kind of laughed, and I looked, and I said, "Well, what did the Secret Service say?" They weren't very happy. Well, that was great. And so it was just, we didn't know what to do when we got in the car. It's like, okay, we've had vacations. Let's go home. But it's just a wonderful time. And I think the beauty of it is, and the chapter is centered around what do you wear when you go to meet the president. And the beauty of it is, if you go and just be yourself, and it's very much the Bushes. You hear it all the time. But like going to visit with your grandparents. It just so happens you look over and there's a picture of Putin. There's a picture over the dignitary. And it's just really, really surreal. But great trip.
That's amazing. I absolutely love it. Man, you have been so gracious with your time. I have one more question for you. But before I ask it, I know that my podcast family is going to want to find you all over the interwebs. Where is the best place to learn all things about Ricky Dickson and where they can pick up their copy of One Scoop at a Time and learn a little bit more about the ministry that God has you doing in this season of your life?
Well, I appreciate it. Definitely, not just the time this morning, but the question itself. This is an exciting chapter of my life. I've been retired now for about 9 weeks, but the book couldn't have come at a better time. After 43 years, I wasn't sure before life in retirement what life would be like, but this book has just been a tremendous blessing. It's onescoopatatime.com would be the first place you can go. It's available on Amazon. It will be out National Ice Cream Month, which is July. I think it's the 16th of July is the actual day that'll be sitting available everywhere, but you can pre-order now. And then RickyDickson.com is a website that not just more about myself, my family, my faith, and then opportunities maybe in the future to come and speak. Truly, I want to be a vessel, and I'm praying that this book will be a seed that will go on the ground for His glory, and however He wants to use it. And that's my heart. It's nothing more than Escalade. It's just a lot about 15. There's a chapter on 2015, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
It was an incredible company to work for, incredible people, incredible product, but most importantly, it's being used in a way and be ready to be used when called upon, and that's what I want to continue to do.
I love it. I love it. Okay, here's the last question I love to ask people. It's an advice question. I'm going to ask you to go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice. And I want to take you back to the day after you became the CEO. So I believe it was 2017. It's the day after, so the celebration's over, and you've got to show up to work and to be the leader that God has called you to be for this community on the other side of this travesty. In 2015, you really have built some intentional practices, and you've really, the whole ship has moved. So if you could go back those years, sit knee to knee with that younger version of yourself, that brand new CEO, hold his hands and look him in the eye and tell him one thing. What's the one piece of advice you're going to give him about the journey he's going to go on?
Super question. And there's probably not enough time to do all the answers. I think that looking back, probably the most critical thing that I knew was happening at the time, but yet there's no way to be able to stop the sands of time going through, and that is time management itself. It's a fragile thing. I'm a servant leader. I've always tried to not just lead by talking, but by empathizing. I want to be where you're at. I want to understand what you do. So if you're on the production line, and I want to understand that. I learned, and again in the book, that you don't necessarily have to do it, but I want to hear you, and that way I can relate to you. And so that requires time. But as CEO, some of my time management skills that I had used as vice president of sales, I had pulled over. But what I found is that you're in demand, and people are waiting on you. And so to give the kind of time I want to give, and then you're hurting others or keeping others in the wait. So to balance that time management, and it was a challenge the whole way, not just at the beginning days, but when you hit the door, it's time management when you get there, and to be able to do the things. You can't empathize unless you're there to listen. But there's also struggles going on, and so you have to take the demands of the day, prioritize those demands, and then be able to not let those others slide, because you can easily push those to the side. One thing, a great example is just walking the production floor. We have 65, 66 branches, distribution all over the country, so it's almost impossible to go to every branch. Something that I was able to do when I was on the sales side. But from a plant standpoint, you have 1,000 employees. That's a third, basically, of the employees. It can be visible. Excuse me. I wanted to be approachable, but it takes time.
Wow.
So to carve out a couple hours a day to walk the floor and to listen and not just be there just because you want people to see you. I want them to be able to come up and ask whatever the question is. And so time management is critical, especially in that role. And making sure you're doing the things not from a fiduciary responsibility, not just from a relationship standpoint, not just from meeting the goals and the visions that are set forth more globally, but just from a day-to-day. How can you be used in a way that's accomplishing the things that you're asked to do? So I would love to go back, and you know what's happening. You just can't, you see the things to do with, and you just can't get to them. It's like, oh, this is frustrating, but, you start early, you stay late, but then all of a sudden you take away time from family, and that's just the truth.
Yeah.
And then if you don't take care of yourself and don't take care of your spiritual side and your family side, then it'll affect your work as well. So we have a kind of a saying to just keep the balls in the air. So let the balls, just keep juggling and keep the balls in the air, and God will get us good.
Amen. Amen. Sir, thank you so much for your generosity of time today. Thank you for your faith that you've poured into this book and for your willingness to come on and share your wisdom with the podcast family. So thankful for you.
Thank you. This is a great, great time together. It's great to meet you, for sure.
I love hearing stories from men who've been through it. Men and women who've just got so much life experience. Ricky's ability to tell great stories was such a gift, and I appreciate his intentionality, and I really do believe that he's got so much wisdom for all of us. So do me a favor, pick up a copy of his book, onescoopatatime.com or rickydixon.com. You can tell him that you heard him here on the podcast. That always goes a long way. And tell him how much you appreciated the conversation. If there's anything I can do for you in the meantime, I'm embarrassingly easy to find at TWMilt on Instagram and X. Also follow the number 2leadcoaching.com is my website. I also put out content every single Wednesday to help you grow in life and leadership. I'm thankful for all y'all, and I can't wait to connect with you real soon. And remember, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.